first alert buzzed at 2:41 a.m., and I woke already halfway angry, because if you buy one of those cheap cameras people put in nurseries and bedrooms, you tell yourself you want peace of mind, not a push notification that says person detected while you snore. I rolled over, blinked at the screen, and saw the freeze frame the cloud had saved. My room in gray infrared, my shape under the blanket, and in the chair against the wall to the right of the bed, a darker human outline that should not have been there. I lay perfectly still because my brain decided that moving would confirm the world was real. The thumbnail would not resolve. My thumb shook against the glass. I tapped to play. The clip started with the usual fisheye view and faint clicking of the IR LEDs, and there I was asleep on my side with my mouth slightly open like a tired animal. And there he was in the chair, knees together, hands on thighs, head tilted the way a person tilts when they are listening to a radio from another room. He did not move. He did not fidget. He did not blink. And I know you will tell me IR can hide eyes, but the stillness was more than that. He sat and watched for 59 minutes while the timestamp crawled, and then the clip ended with no exit. I threw the blanket off like it would help. The chair was where it always was. No one sat in it. The door was locked with the deadbolt thrown. The chain was on. The windows were shut and pinned because this is an older building and I have learned how to make old windows obey. I stood in the center of my room in bare feet and tried to swallow against a mouth that had decided saliva was a luxury. The idea of trying to fall back asleep after that was comical. I made coffee at 3 in the morning like a man practicing for retirement and watched the clip again with the volume up. The audio track was mostly hiss and the little groan wood makes when temperature shifts. At 3:17, there was a soft intake of breath that could have been mine, could have been his, could have been the camera, and then nothing. I sent the clip to myself twice and to my mother 0 times because there are things you do not put on the family text thread. When the sun finally rubbed its eyes over the city, I swore I would handle it like a grown-up. By lunchtime, the fear had become a story I could almost laugh at. By dinner, I had half convinced myself it was a glitch, a double exposure, IR noise, a reflection. By the time I brushed my teeth, I had reverted to superstition and moved the chair 6 feet to the left. The second alert fired at 3:08. I told myself I would not check it until morning and checked it anyway. The chair had been moved, but in the video, the figure sat where the chair used to be, perched in air that should have been empty, and the camera shifted focus like it was trying to decide whether to honor physics or habit. He was closer now, not to me but to the lens, and I felt that the way you feel a stranger in an aisle behind you before you see him. Again, he sat for nearly an hour without visible movement. Again, the clip ended without exit. Again, the locks were as I had left them. The next day, I changed them anyway because you make purchases when you cannot change facts. The locksmith did that gentle banter thing service people do when they want you to accept competence as a sedative. He asked whether I wanted a smart lock. I said I wanted a lock a human hand had to turn. He said he understood and put in a deadbolt that could stop a shoulder. I bought 2 more cameras and placed one on the dresser facing the bed from the other angle and one in the hall facing my door. You can drown fear in angles if you can afford enough lenses. That night, I lay down with 3 apps open like a man watching his own life on television. When the alert buzzed, I had already been awake for 30 minutes. The hall camera showed nothing. The bedroom cameras agreed on one thing. At 3:17, the figure was present, in the old chair position again, as if the room meant more than the furniture. The camera by the dresser caught a shift I would have missed if I had not been looking for anything to cling to. His chest rose, not by much. Not even as much as mine. I scrubbed back and forward 3 times to prove it to myself, and then I turned the volume all the way up and put the phone to my ear and heard the kind of soft sleeve whisper cloth makes against cloth when a person flexes without meaning to. He was breathing. My breathing matched his without my permission. I called the non-emergency line because I am not the person who summons sirens until I need to, and said the thing out loud. I told the officer my camera showed someone in my room while I slept. I told him the doors were locked. I told him I lived alone. He asked whether I could send the clip, and when I did, he said calmly that he would send a patrol to drive by and that I should consider keeping lights on. He asked whether I had recently watched any horror films that might prime me for a trick of the eye, and I laughed because I deserved the question. When the officer in the cruiser came, he checked the door and the windows and walked through my apartment with the easy competence of a man whose job is to push his fear into a corner with discipline. He looked at the cameras and asked whether anyone else had access to the cloud account. He watched the clip and said that IR reflections can produce convincing artifacts. He tapped the back of the chair and said furniture can look like bodies at night. He asked whether I had a roommate or an ex. I said no and no. He handed me a card in case things escalated and told me to call if there was evidence of entry. He was kind, and the kind did not help. I worked from home the next day because office small talk felt like a language whose alphabet I had lost. When I told my friend Jenna, she said, "Text me the clip," and then texted the exact swear I had used in my own kitchen and then said, "I am sending you a blowtorch emoji in spirit." She offered to sleep on my couch. I told her no, because I was embarrassed and because a part of me did not want witnesses if I was losing to my own camera. The next night I decided I would be awake when he arrived. Exhaustion did its best to sell me other plans, but coffee and adrenaline are a persuasive team. I set the camera alerts to silent, but left the live view on. At 3:13, the house seemed to hold its breath with me. The fridge clicked, the radiator whispered. The hall camera remained blank. At 3:17, the view shifted in two ways at once. The cameras did not ping a door opening or a body crossing the hall. They simply did that tiny gain adjustment digital eyes do in the dark, and then he was in the chair position again. In the room itself, there was no one. The chair was empty. There was no smell, no cold front, no shift in air the way there is when someone large walks into your oxygen. And yet the camera showed him with the faith of a lens. I angled my body in bed to be sure I was not accidentally aligned like a second exposure. The silhouette did not match mine. He sat with his knees pressed together the way school children sit when they have been told not to rattle. He had my hoodie on, the gray one with the frayed cuff I thought I had lost at the laundromat last winter. He wore it like it was his, and the thought made something small in me break. I looked up from the phone to the chair and very clearly saw the hoodie folded on my dresser where I had left it. I looked back down and saw it on his shoulders. My stomach found a trapdoor. I said out loud without meaning to say anything, "I see you." In the video, he tilted his head 4 degrees. He did not turn toward me. He turned toward the phone in my hand. The next day I did the thing people do when they can no longer pretend that their bed is a safe island. I moved it. I shifted it to the other wall. I left the chair against the window. I sprinkled flour on the floor in a thin circle where the chair had been out of pure theater, then laughed at myself for being dramatic, then did it again because the laugh did not make the fear less true. I showered at 10 like a man trying to witness his own choices. When the alert buzzed at 3, I refused to sit up and watched on my back like a patient. The chair on screen was empty. The circle of flowers showed no footfalls. The figure sat on the floor now, cross-legged, exactly where the chair had been the last 2 nights, and the flower at his shins made 2 symmetrical dashes like someone had knelt there long enough to settle. He reached up, just once, to adjust something near his face, and the camera lost focus for a half second, as if embarrassed to be looking, and my skin went tight because that simple human gesture felt like the first time he had acknowledged he had a body. In the morning, the flower showed 2 marks that could have been knees or could have been my failure to sweep carefully, and I had to live with not knowing which it was. On my phone, the cloud flashed me a new treat. Your camera recognized a face. Tap to see who. I tapped and saw the chair scene and a small label the app applies when it has seen a face enough times to name it. Owner. I stopped sharing any of it with anyone. You can live with being afraid. Living with being doubted is worse. I bought an SD card to store the clips locally because part of me believed that keeping my own memory of this would change the shape of it. The first night I used the card, the video played with faint horizontal lines, as if I had put a tape into a VCR that should have been thrown away a decade ago. Between the lines, I saw him stand once for the first time, not all the way up, just enough to bring his face off the center of the frame and toward the camera. He leaned in until the grain of his skin was a film of gray and black, and then the lens caught something eyes do with IR and flashed small white coins at me like a dare. He opened his mouth. No audio came through. I tried to read his lips with a seriousness I gave to no other hobby in my adult life. 2 words maybe. Come home. I was already home, and the ache of that sat with me all day like a coin under my tongue. The building manager let me pull old records because she is the kind of woman who notices when a tenant's rent checks arrive at 3 in the morning. The apartment had ride-alonged with a half dozen of us in the last 10 years. Short stays mostly, short leases, a couple breakages. One line in the log caught my attention, not because it was dramatic, but because it swallowed detail. 6 years ago, a tenant named David broke his lease with 2 months left. No forwarding address. Deposit surrendered. I should have let it go. I found David anyway, because the internet is the opposite of moving on. He answered my email with the brevity of a man who has learned what happens when you get chatty with strangers about old apartments. He said in 3 sentences that he had left because he never slept again until he did. He said he had bought one of those cameras and then bought sleep medication and then left both behind. He said he was glad someone else had the place now because it meant he was not crazy, and also that I probably would be. He did not answer any more messages. I put my phone down like it was a hot pan and stared at the wall until the paint looked like another language. That night I stayed at Jenna's because she insisted in a text that required 0 explanation. Her spare room smelled like detergent and eucalyptus, and the absence of my camera feeds felt like going deaf while the orchestra kept playing. 2 hours into stiff sheets, my phone buzzed anyway, because I had not turned off the cloud, and because the cloud does not care where you put your head. Person detected. The freeze frame was my empty bed. The figure sat in the chair and for the first time looked directly at the camera with a tilt of surprise that hurt more than any of the other poses. He lifted his hand and held it out like a person about to pat a restless dog. His mouth again shaped 2 words. Come home. The clip ended with the usual nothing, and I stared at my own phone in a stranger's bed and understood that leaving the space would not cancel the pattern. The pattern was the point. I slept poorly. In the morning, Jenna made eggs, and the normal smell of hot butter offended me for being sane. I went home like a man giving himself back to a current. I decided to make contact without hiding behind viewports. I printed a single question in thick black type and taped it to the wall at the height of the camera lens. Who are you? I wrote it twice because redundancy felt like respect. I left the lights on because I wanted the challenge to be fair, and sat on the edge of the bed and counted to 100 with my eyes closed, because sometimes you have to believe in stupid rituals to keep the larger superstition from eating you. I fell asleep crooked on the blanket with my shoes on. At 3:20, the alert plucked me up like a fish on a line. I looked at the feed and saw the figure stand for the second time. He walked to the wall with that too careful step people use when they are pretending not to be drunk and looked at the words. His head moved left to right, like a scanner. He reached behind the paper. The tape led him. He peeled the page away and showed the camera the blank drywall and pressed the paper back with the other side facing out. Not a mirror and not magic. Just an ordinary flipping of something that had a front and a back. On the back of my question, the camera showed 2 words that I had not written and that carried my own handwriting. I am. He sat in the chair again, and the small moving lines rolled across the video, and for the first time I had the thought that he and I were not 2, not entirely. I tried to send the clips to an internet stranger who collects this kind of thing like pressed leaves. The file refused to upload. The cloud sat at 99% until it decided it had better things to do. I copied it to a thumb drive and drove it across town to Jenna and watched her watch it in her living room, because watching someone else watch is sometimes the only way to know you have not fallen inside the images. Her face went blank, the way minds do when they are protecting you from their own conclusions. She said, "You are going to leave that place." I said, "Where would I go that the thing would not follow?" She did not answer because she is a kind friend, and good friends know when answering is not a kindness. The next week I learned what it wanted or what I wanted or how little those two differ. When your eyes near 3 in the morning keep finding your own bedroom from a height of 5 feet 8 through cheap optics. I set an alarm for 3:10 and did not have to because I wake now at 2:58 whether I want to or not. I lay on my back and did not pretend to sleep. I told the room in a voice that sounded less like mine than any I have used that if you need something from me, you can say it. The camera showed him tilt. The audio hissed. The heater clicked. He stood again and leaned until his forehead nearly filled the frame and his mouth shaped 3 words that even my amateur lip reading could not miss because he formed them like a person trying on speech after a long quiet. Switch places. And then he smiled, not to be kind or cruel, but the way a person smiles when they guess the trick you cannot keep hiding. The last stretch of this story is harder to tell because it does not collapse into handholds. The truth I have is this. I started falling asleep in the chair without remembering deciding to sit in it. I would wake at 12:40 with my neck in the shape of a question mark and stand and lie on the bed and wake again at 3:03 with my hands palmed down on my legs like a man waiting. The camera clips for those nights show no sitter at all. They show an empty chair and my body on the bed. But the audio includes a soft, slow breath from the right height at the right distance, as if someone I could not see were sharing the room with an honesty that made me feel ungrateful for flinching. On the 10th night of trying to live with this and also work and text my mother back and answer emails and pretend to have a future, I woke sitting up straight in the chair with my eyes open to my own room. I could see my bed. I could see my body on it asleep in a manner that looked exactly like every thumbnail I have watched for a month. My hands rested perfectly on my thighs. My mouth tasted like nothing. The air did not smell sweet or old. It smelled like the absence of smell, like clinic air, like other people's laundromats. I could not lift my hands. I could not stand. I could not do anything except sit and watch. On the dresser, my phone lay face down, because I had thrown it there at midnight like a man punishing a child. From the hall came the faint clicking scuff of the camera that faces my door when it toggles its IR. Another camera lives in my room and watched me watch myself. For 59 minutes, I kept vigil over a man who looks like me because he is me. I learned the shape of my breathing by sound and angle and knew with a clarity that did not feel like terror that my job in that hour was to remain. At 4:01, I could move again. I stood. My living body on the bed turned a little and sighed and kept sleeping. I did not walk out. I stopped at the wall where the paper had been and set my open palm against the paint without knowing why. In the morning, there was a faint print there like a memory a wall had decided to keep. I have tried to break the pattern. I have tried sleeping at friends' places and on couches and in cars under soft neon in parking lots where you can pretend the world is a less private thing than it is. The camera sends its little notes anyway. Person detected while you are not home. The thumbnails show an empty chair and the bed and a corner of a man's shoulder sometimes where the lens catches me coming into frame to check what the lens is doing. Some nights the sitter does not appear and the relief tastes like expensive water. Some nights he is closer to the lens and his eyes throw back white coins and his mouth forms small sentences I cannot always catch. Some mornings the app tells me again that it saw a familiar face at 3:17 and tags it with my name. I have turned off the alerts and then turned them back on because turning them off does not make the hour go away. I have returned the chair to the wall and left it where the flower once circled. I have thrown the chair out and bought another, and the camera shows the sitter perched at the same piece of air. I have learned that there are roles and that some nights you are the one being watched, and some nights you are not. I am careful now with how often I stare at the feed because attention is a kind of invitation, and cameras are their own kind of mirror. You will ask why I have not moved again, and I will tell you that I know better. The videos follow the body, not the lease. You will ask whether I am safe, and I will tell you that I am held to a schedule with a rigor that does not feel like harm until I resist. You will ask whether I recommend buying cameras for your bedroom, and I will tell you to buy them and to leave them off and to sleep like a person who is allowed to be seen only by the dark. If you check your phone at 2:41 and you see anyone in your room but you, do not zoom in, do not scrub back and forth, do not try to catch the breath in the hiss. Sleep is an agreement and the camera is a witness you cannot ask to testify kindly. Some watchers are strangers. One watches, looks like you, and waits his turn. When he smiles, it is not for comfort. It is for recognition.